I mean, let's be honest. This is the worst it can get. I've been watching the Public Accounts Committee, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I always try to watch the Public Accounts Committee of Ghana just so I can have an idea of what goes on at the ministries and at the state departments when it comes to money expenditure. Every year, ladies and gentlemen, we get blown out with exposés of how state budgets are abused, misused, overused at the expense of taxpayers. Every year. And this year's hasn't been any different, ladies and gentlemen. And next year will be the same. You see, the Public Accounts Committee's work is driven by the Auditor General's report. So the PAC's job is to scrutinize the Auditor General's report. And by the law, this report is supposed to be submitted to Parliament within 6 months after the end of the preceding financial year, which actually means, ladies and gentlemen, that the financial year ends on December 31st. The report should be submitted to Parliament by June 30th of the following month. This in itself, ladies and gentlemen, is a problem. And this is what I mean in simple terms. You give money to someone to work on your behalf. Just pay attention to this. You give money to someone to work on your behalf. You leave the person the whole year to do whatever he wants to do with the money. And you only come back at the end of the year to have the person render an account. If you really cared about your money and wanted to make sure wastages are limited and things are not blown out of proportion, why don't you check on the person in, say, every 3 months, ladies and gentlemen? If you really want to avoid this kind of problem, ladies and gentlemen, knowing very well that every year they squander money, why don't you do your checks and balances every 3 months, ladies and gentlemen? You wait the whole year, knowing very well what can potentially happen before you do this exercise. Sorry, I really don't understand you. Do you know why every year the story is the same for overblown budgets and wastages in Ghana's Public Accounts Committee hearings? Do you want to know why? It is simply because the central government itself does it and nothing happens, and the ministries and department sees it, ladies and gentlemen. The central government of Ghana comes up with its budget for the year, and along the line, they come for more money all the time. This is what happens all the time. Now, whether that's an issue or not is a subject for another day. The only difference here is this. In the case of the government, it must make a case for the extra money needed, which must be approved by Parliament before given. But these guys at the ministries and departments, ladies and gentlemen, at those levels mostly don't. They just take more without approval. And it's something that has been going on for a long while. Now, let me ruffle your feathers here, ladies and gentlemen. Whether someone seeks approval or doesn't, what do we actually see happen, ladies and gentlemen? They both end up taking more than they initially requested. Let that sink in for a minute. At the end of the day, the habit is this. More will be needed no matter what is requested. This is what is happening there. Therefore, I say to you that the reason these things happen is because these ministries and departments learn from the government. And you may say, but Cyrus, that's a dumb argument in the sense that even if they really need it to be functional, you don't just put your hands in public funds and use it without permission. And you have to provide reasons, and it must be scrutinized and maybe approved. That's what you may be saying to me. Well, you may have a point there, but this is my rebuttal to you. When a person is consistent with seeking permission to come back for more, in spite of how much he's given, does it make the person any different from another person who also comes back for more but doesn't always ask for permission? Ladies and gentlemen, you need to process what I just said carefully before you comment, because ultimately they all come back for more no matter how much they are given. No matter how much these people are given, ministries, department, they will always come back for more. So tell me, what is the difference here? One of the most important questions we have to ask is, what do they do with the extra money they request or take on their own? Or let me put it in this way. What did they do with the initial money they were given according to their budget? Do they use it for what the money was meant for or not? If a department head came to the treasurer to say, we need more money for cleaning suits or for filling the tanks of the department head's cars, what would your response be as a department head? These guys, whether ministers or department heads, are all the same at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. That's how I see it. They only cry foul or seem to care when the money wasn't used by them. Whether you go to the district assemblies or public universities or hospitals or state departments or ministries, the stories are the same. They blow money like no one's business. They are the same people who are appointed by the president to hold these departments or ministries. Who appoints the head of the ECG of Ghana? As a matter of fact, who appoints the heads of all these government enterprises? All the charade happening on TV about the committee's account won't change anything, ladies and gentlemen, because the system isn't meant to render accounts in real time. If the system really wanted to ensure these nuances don't repeat themselves, it will make the checks and the balances a regular thing and provide that information to the public regularly, ladies and gentlemen. You don't wait for 1 year. And when that is done, we may stand a greater chance of avoiding such happenings than waiting for a whole year to do this. I have a real set of questions to ask, and I hope you that is watching me can help me with answers. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Question number 1. What happens when the government overspend their budget? What happens? What happens when a department head uses state fund without the appropriate approvals? What happens? What happens when politicians steal from government? What happens? Now, let's ask these questions. Are the sanctions for such actions deterrent enough, ladies and gentlemen? Let's not kid ourselves as a country. The four pillars on which this country is built begins with bad leadership, number 1, across board, corruption, partisan politics over state interest, and then greed. This is what we are up against. Ladies and gentlemen, these guys have done it for so long that they know that all they have to do when they are brought before the law is to first of all admit for doing wrong and then render an apology and wait for a pardon. They haven't seen anyone's home confiscated by the state and their bank accounts taken over by the state. They've never seen real prison term and a stripping of their retirement packages meted out to any of their predecessors. In the worst case scenario, ladies and gentlemen, these heads, they know that one government may stifle them for a while, and a new government will come in and release them and even restore them, ladies and gentlemen. We need a new system which makes standardization the center for everything. We cannot allow for all manner of quotations to go through without first passing our system or standards. For instance, the cost of building government projects must be standardized. This means for a 6-classroom block, the state need to have its own standardized cost estimates, which factors inflation and all, ladies and gentlemen, that is approved by Parliament, no matter where that project is to be built in the country. The quality must be standardized as well as the quantity. This nuances is one of the reasons inflation easily takes over our country. You go to the local marketplace, ladies and gentlemen, and everything is done on the face value. There is no scale to determine weight and price. It's either you are a good negotiator or you are not, or else you get cheated. That's exactly how our country is being run. Someone procures a set of computers for State Department and indicates that 1 unit of that computer costs $10,000. Meanwhile, the same spec of a computer, that same computer is sold on the market for $1,500 in Ghana. Where are the standards and who's checking before the year ends, ladies and gentlemen? Dry cleaning in the millions of dollars for a year, that's crazy. Can we ever have value for money for the things we do for the state in this country? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm only watching to see where this will go. And I hope this current government proves everyone wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching. And don't forget to subscribe if today is your first time watching us. I'm Cyrus in Accra, Ghana. I'll come your way again with another one. It is bye-bye for now.